Hi everyone, this is Dr. Diane Hayden and Marianne Costerella with How to Thrive in These Changing Times, what your soul is calling you to do now. And today we're going to be talking about the fact that just about every planet's in retrograde. Maybe
Yes.
not every planet, but quite a few of them, and how it's all sort of, relating to current events and things that are happening. So this should be a really interesting discussion. I thought maybe we could also, throw in some numerology and astrology and all that in there. So, we talked a little bit earlier in the week just about the planets that are in retrograde. So I guess we can start there and just like do a little refresher of what's happening right now, and then
Sure.
get into, just what you think, how that's affecting everything that's going on right now, from still dealing with COVID-19 to, all kinds of things that are happening in the world today.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So yes, as Diane just began the introduction, four major planets are retrograding right now. And let me just throw out a very easy way to understand the word retrograde. The R-E can be defined as restructure, reorganize, redo, restart, anything, revise, anything that has to do with going back over and proofreading, whether it's a document or it's an aspect of your life or your karma, in both individually and collectively. So today we're going to be looking at how these planets are affecting the cosmos and how they're affecting, obviously, our individual karmic issues. So the four major planets that are currently in retrograde, soon to be joined, I will add parenthetically, by Mercury in 2 weeks, which most of us know what Mercury retrograde means. It means mess ups in communication and travel, kind of what we would consider somewhat minor mess-ups on this planet. But now we have the major planets in addition to Mercury retrograding. So each planet is assigned a different karmic homework energy for you individually and also for the planet. So the four major planets that are moving backwards right now are Venus, Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto. And I'm just going to say a word about each one of them and what they're assigned to help us work on. So Venus is the planet of love and relationships. So I'm just going to keep it that simple. Venus is goddess of love, relationships, and all things pertaining to that, which is a lot. That's in retrograde. Jupiter is in retrograde, which is, I guess I would have to say, the planet of abundance. It can be, but sometimes it can also be the planet of excess. So, on a good day, it's good stuff coming in, and on a bad day, it's too much stuff coming in, so excess. So we have both of those, what I would call benefic planets, because they're kind of good guys, Venus and Jupiter, but they're retrograding right now. And so that's another whole piece of homework that we'll look at. Saturn, which is, as most of us know, the planet of lessons, the planet of discipline, of restriction, of buckling down and doing your homework. Saturn basically wants us to figure out what our work is, what our lesson, what our homework is here on the planet. And then finally, Pluto, which is the planet of death and transformation. We usually use the word transformation. That has a much more positive or uplifting sound to it. Unfortunately, right now, because of its retrograde motion and the fact that it's sitting in the sign of Capricorn, it has a much heavier energetic output. And that output is, quite honestly, that fearful word, death. So the mortality of each individual, the mortality of the planet, You know, have we been doing our homework again responsibly? Because Pluto wants it all to transform and to change. So those are the 4 major planets that are currently retrograding, soon to be joined by Mercury on June 18th. So, you know, what I also want to say astrologically that is going to happen is that on June 27th, the planet Mars, which rules war, conflict, action, is currently in Pisces, which is actually it doesn't like being in Pisces. It's a water sign, and it's not real definitive about its direction. Sometimes it's going forward, sometimes it's going back, sometimes it's soft-hearted, sometimes it's confused, it's ambivalent. It just has difficulty taking a stand. However, on June 27th, the planet Mars is moving into Aries and will be there for all of 2020 into 2021. And Aries is where Mars absolutely is exalted. It loves to be in Aries because Aries is where it can feel its potency. And, you know, at a time like the one we are currently in this moment, the word potency is a scary word. Because it literally could represent more conflict, more aggression, more war, more, you know, hostility, more people kind of, it's a fire sign, and it wants to express its anger. It doesn't hold on to its anger like other signs do. Aries wants to get rid of it. And it does it quite effectively. If it's in a natal chart, people who have Mars and Aries, you know, they're very capable of telling you exactly what they think and how they feel. No holding back. So 6 to 7 months of 2020 into 2021, January of 2021, Mars is going to be sitting in Aries, which, you know, I'm not going to predict. I have no clue really how that's going to quote unquote explode, but that is definitely what's in store. Okay. So if I were to look at the letters, so Diane mentioned numerology. So if I were to look at the letters R-E, which begins the word retrograde. R is a 9, and E is a 5 in numerology. So if I add 9 and 5, I get 14, and if I reduce that one more time, I get a 5. So when I reorganize, when I restructure, when I you know, rework, redo, all that, I am changing the energy. So the energy is currently undergoing a lot of change that has been long overdue. Okay, so this retrograding, there's no coincidence in terms of the timeliness of the retrogrades and what's going on our planets that, you know, we're seeing what we're seeing, because, you know, my belief and my bias is that the planets lead and the world follows. So when the planet makes a decision to move in a certain direction, it's got a homework assignment and agenda, you know, ready for us down here to, you know, get going with, just like it would if it was happening in your individual chart. But we're looking at the chart of the culture right now. And the chart of the culture essentially is that RE means change. And if I were to bring in some of the current events that are going on right now in terms of how to code what happened on May 25th, which was the homicide of George Floyd, at the hands of Derek Chauvin, if we were to look at that and see how that is a statement about these retrograding planets, most of us can figure out that obviously Venus being in retrograde essentially is speaking about the relationship, the man's inhumanity to man, that whole theme, that whole concept of how am I in relationship to my fellow man? How am I in relationship to the world, to myself, to other people in my world, and to the world in general? So Venus retrograde is saying, okay, I want you guys to go all the way back. As a matter of fact, maybe we need to go all the way back 400 years and resurrect this relationship between people of color and people lacking color, so to speak. And so that is definitely a retrograde issue, in generally speaking. And then, of course, we have the death issue, which is Pluto in Capricorn. And so we have a death that has ignited, you know, what I would say in many cases, certainly a lot of justifiable feelings based on what we saw on the video, based on what we've read in the news, and based on other events that have happened that have had a likeliness or similarity to this particular event. But I want to also add parenthetically, as a therapist, I also believe there's a huge amount of displacement of feelings and emotions that are coming from each individual and then piled on to this event. But that's what we do. That's what we all do. We project our own issues and we look at, how other people, kind of help us to reenact our issues and trigger us. And so on 5/25/2020, which is for the world, in terms of numerology, it was a 7-day for the world. And 7 in numerology is about lessons. It's about karmic lessons. 25, 5/25. Again, no coincidence here. 25 is a 7. So 5/25 is a 7 of clubs day. So you've got the 25, the 7, and then a 7 of clubs day. And the second card for 5/25 is a 5 of diamonds. And then you've got the 5th month. And 5 in numerology is all about change and crisis and chaos and perhaps revolution, if I want to be so liberal as to add that word to it. So you have 5/25, 7 of clubs, 5 of diamonds day. 7 of clubs is the card of spiritual knowledge. The seven of clubs people, receive a lot of information from the other side. What they choose to do with it is clearly up to them. But it is a card that represents spiritual, obviously the 7 spiritual, and then the club knowledge. The 7 of clubs owes karmically the 8 of diamonds, and it receives karmically from the Jack of Spades. So if I were to move more in the direction of the individuals who created this world event, George Floyd is born on October 14th. He's an 8 of clubs. And a 4 of spades is his second card. 8 of clubs, 4 of spades. Okay. Now I'm going to move over to the other column. Derek Chauvin, ironically, coincidentally, however you might want to define it to yourself, is a 4 of diamonds and an 8 of diamonds, born on March 19th. So we have 2 4s and 2 8s in terms of the destiny cards. Okay. 8 is the number of power. 4 is the box, so to speak. Structure, discipline, box. Okay. So we have 2 people who are interested in power, denoted by their 8s, and 2 people who also have a certain amount of structure to their nature innately. George Floyd is age 46, which tells me that he was in his Saturn year. Anybody at age 46 is in their Saturn year. Saturn, again, going back to how we started, is the planet of discipline, the planet of, okay, or the year. If you're in your Saturn year, it's going to be a more difficult year. It's, you know, basically the planet's wanting you to buckle down and do the work that you've avoided doing. So he was in his Saturn year, 46. Derek Chauvin, who was 44, was in his pre-birth year, which is the most difficult year, according to the Destiny card system, to be in, because it is the year of review. It is the year where you go back and you review the first 44 years of your life. And before you hit the age of 45, you make a choice to take what you need and leave the rest. You know, what didn't work for me in the first 44 years, what people, what teachings from my parents, from my family of origin did I learn that I'm no longer interested in maintaining? What, you know, where do I want to move to in the second half of my life? So this is where Chauvin was. He's in the most difficult year of his life, which is applicable to anybody on the planet. Age 44 is the most difficult. 45, you get your cards re-dealt to you and you start all over again. But 44, you're looking at all your old cards. So I'm going to take it one step further, and I'm going to decode the 8 minutes and 46 seconds that this knee was in George Floyd's neck, metaphorically. So 8 minutes, as we know, 8 is about power. Okay. So obviously a lot of power exerted, both physically, physiologically on his body, and both clearly emotionally. The police officer was coming from a place of power over him. The 46 end, they are both 8s. Okay, they're both 8s. And Chauvin, I'm sorry, the 46 seconds is George Floyd's age. And if you add 8 to 46, so 46 is a 1, and if you add it to the 8, you get a 9, which again, we're back to death and dying. And if you add Chauvin's age and Floyd's age together, you get 90. So 44 and 46 is 90, which again is endings. So it is this endings of karma for each of these individual people, because Floyd died on a 7 of clubs day, and he owed, the 7 of clubs owes the Jack of spades, and the Jack of spades is the ripoff card. So the Jack of spades can mean theft. It can mean stealing. You know, he was involved obviously in an illegal act at the time he was arrested. Was his individual karma at that day. In his first year of the second year of his second half of his life, when he really needed to be moving forward with his karma, this was the time that the universe said, okay, karma's up. I don't know. I'm just putting out numbers. I'm just putting out interconnections and relationships between 2 people that individually met their karma on that particular day. So what else do I want to say about that? I think that it's interesting because if we go back to COVID-19, that also was an 8 and a 1. When I decoded the word COVID, and then the word 19 is a 1 and COVID is an 8. So again, power and control over the masses. This virus, this pandemic has exerted power and control. Regardless of how you interpret the virus and its presence in our life, we've certainly been, excuse me, controlled by it in terms of not being able to leave our homes or wearing masks or following social distancing guidelines or whatever. There's been an element of control. The other thing I want to mention, coincidentally, is on the day of the blackout, which was Tuesday of this week. This is how meta is always working in our lives. So when I noticed all of a sudden that many people on Instagram and Facebook were, just pasting a black screen to their posting in honor and in deference to the death of George Floyd and racism. I didn't think it was too much of a coincidence that the moon on that particular day was in the sign of Scorpio. Okay, and Scorpio is death, power, control, dominance, submission. It is holding down. So Scorpio holds down secrets. It holds down energies. It doesn't open the wound. It keeps the wound in hiding. And I mean, clearly on that particular day, there was silence. There was mystery. There was blackness. There was heaviness. There was death. Surrounding all of us, regardless of, our particular individual biases or feelings about everything that was going on. This was death again. This was Pluto again saying, you guys aren't getting it yet. You're not doing the homework. I mean, here we have this incident, this event that is in many ways representative of what's going on within your individual selves, within your relationships between home and family, politics. It's just what's hidden. What are the hidden agendas? What's blacked out? What do we not know? So, again, meta, I found it very interesting that it was in Scorpio at that time, and it represents the energy of silence. Okay. And obviously, then, if you look at the next sign after Scorpio in the zodiac, right now, currently, we're in Sagittarius. So Sagittarius, as opposed to Scorpio, says, let's open up. Let's talk. Let's be friends. Let's look at the wound. Let's heal. Sagittarius is a sign of friendship. But as there is in this life, every zodiacal sign represents a different part of the human nature. And so that's why I do believe that the planets are assigning the homework, and then we're either doing it or we're not. So that's also important. And a question that I had, just energetically, not that I know the answer to it, and not that even my making the connection between these two may be right. I mean, I may be completely off base here and even asking this question, but as many jokes have been made on social media about, I think I saw one saying something about, oh, well, now something about taking the COVID-19 decorations down. I haven't had time to take my Christmas decorations down. Now we're into rioting or violence or whatever. And then again, I said, oh, this is interesting. Like, is this on some level what we're currently going through? Although there's huge validity and validation in why this is all going on, but is this also a reaction to the containment. So, you know, obviously people have been held down for 3 or 4 months, just like they've been held down for 400 years. Is this all now, you know, an outbreak? Because all of a sudden COVID-19 doesn't seem to be as much of a concern because people are putting their bodies out there in close proximity to other bodies and basically saying, you know, what's more important here is my love for my fellow man, is humanity, is how we've been treating each other, is what police brutality and racism is all about, all those things. So, you know, I don't know. I, you know, again, just questions that I've been asking myself and looking at.
So I just want to jump in. That is
Yep.
so interesting that you just said that, because I'm gonna tell you a story. So, I have a friend. He's actually my ex from college, and
Mhm.
he's African American,
Mhm.
and he has lived in LA since 1990, and so he lived through the Rodney King, you know, rioting and all that.
Right.
So when this whole COVID thing started in, like, say, I'm going to say it was probably like the end of March, beginning of April. They had shut everything down in California, in LA. He and his wife went to Scottsdale, and I just happened to reach out to him and say, hey, you know, I heard that LA, like, you can see the sky in LA, like there's no smog. I didn't know that he had left LA. So I was just, you know, being funny, like, oh my gosh, you know, you can finally see the horizon in LA. There's no smog because there's no traffic and planes and whatnot. And he said, oh, he's like, actually, I wouldn't know. I'm in Scottsdale. And I'm like, what are you doing in Scottsdale? And he goes, are you kidding me? I already lived through Rodney King. I'm not doing that again. And I'm thinking to myself, what is he talking about? There's no rioting going on. I mean, like, rioting because of COVID? And so I asked him, I'm like, what do you mean? And he said to me, and this is back in, I swear it was like end of March, beginning of April.
Yep.
He said to me, just wait, Di. He's like, you cannot keep people locked up for extended periods of time. He goes, something is going to happen. He's like, I don't know what. But my wife's brother lives in Scottsdale, and we're working virtually, so we just got out of LA and we went to Scottsdale. I mean, can you believe that? Like, he either had some
intuition or download.
Yeah, totally. That something was going to happen, whether it was, you know, specifically related to this situation, or you know, or just in general, people just being like, you know, we can't stay inside cooped up anymore. And
that's right.
But I totally think that it all interrelates somehow. Like,
yes,
you know, I feel like people are definitely more on edge when you scroll through social media now. And I'm not saying that you should minimize, that anyone should minimize what happened, or not talk about it, or not express their feelings about it. But I feel like it is so charged that, you know, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm afraid to say anything, because no matter what I say, someone is going to jump on something, misinterpret it, or take it in a different way than what I had intended. It's just, and everyone's like, this person's saying this thing, and this person's saying that thing. And, you know, not just with Floyd, with COVID now, it's still, you know, like back and forth, everyone's opinion about what they think. It's just, you know, crazy. But
it is.
I mean, the fact that you know, your question about that, I thought, yeah, absolutely. Like, people were already, I think, thinking if something's going to happen, and
that's right.
You know, I'm just going to.
Oh, I mean, we're energy. If you think about it, each and every single one of us are energy. So the same energy that perhaps might create this sort of massive reaction, whether it be an overreaction. I mean, I think that's even the way it's been with COVID. It's either an overreaction or an underreaction. You know, it's either too much or too, and again, as I mentioned, Jupiter is the planet of excess. So it's retrograding. So it's in Capricorn, and Jupiter and Capricorn do not like each other again, because Jupiter is rule, rule Sagittarius. It wants everything to be fun and happy and optimistic. And when you put Capricorn on top of Jupiter, you got like oil and water, because Capricorn is heavy and dark, and do your homework and get back inside that house and stay home. And, so Jupiter is like, no, 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 I need to be out of my box. And so whether it's kind of like in any relationship, even between two people, people come in for couples counseling or whatever. It's never really about what they say the issue is about. It's really more about what's going on underneath at a deeper level. So, these issues that come up, people, I think, don't even know. None of us really even know our own feelings or our own emotions or our own reactions. I mean, I was in an awful mood yesterday. And I think a lot of it is because, as you say, you scroll through social media, and it's no matter what you say or how you think, there's a culture out there that thinks they know more, and they're extremely opinionated, even on the racism issue. I mean, I've never considered myself, racist, but then again, it's kind of like it's almost like there's a new culture that wants to educate us about what racism is and what it isn't. And all of a sudden I feel like, okay, I don't know anything anymore, and I better keep quiet, because, I obviously haven't been educated on what either the people that are streaming through social media seem to know way more than I do. And I'm going to be criticized or judged for how I express something. So I better not express anything. And then that implies you're being complicit because you're not expressing. And it's like, oh my goodness.
Yeah. I totally agree with you. And so from my perspective, I'm thinking, okay, this has actually given me an opportunity to explore the way that I think. And and I love that, because being someone who was in an interracial relationship back in the 90s, like late 80s, actually early 90s, I kind of felt like, oh, I know everything there is to know about that. I've been through that and I've experienced it. And while I probably have experienced more things as a white female than someone who wasn't in an interracial relationship, like I definitely experienced people judging and, and discrimination. And, I lost a job because my boss found out I was dating a Black man. And I've had a bunch of stuff, but that's not the point. The point I'm trying to say is I felt like I was pretty educated about it and knew what it was, and definitely was like, oh my gosh, like there is absolutely no degree of racism in me because I dated a Black guy.
That's right.
You know what? Like when things have come up on social media and my first thought has been in a particular way, I've had to step back and say, wait a minute, like, gosh, is that really like an anti-racist thought? Is there still something? I almost feel like there like epigenetics. The study of epigenetics is, and Diane can jump in here if she wants because she knows way more about it than I do, but my understanding is epigenetics is basically that things pass from generation to generation. And I'm talking about like on a physiological, like health perspective. Right. What your grandmother ate can affect you as a person. Mm-hmm. And so I almost feel like it's almost like that on a level. Like, even though you can be the most non-racist person, the most open person, the most non-judgmental person, you practice those things in your life, there's still some things in the genetics of it that passes from, generation to generation. And our work is still to eradicate that. Right. So, but I like the fact that it has actually given me pause to think about the way that I think about things, mm-hmm. and to look at that, because to me that's the lesson. It's okay, guess what? You thought that you did all this work already, but maybe there's still some more work to be done.
Right. Well, isn't that how we think about everything? I mean, really, we find out that, and that's why these retrogrades happen, because they keep saying to us, go back and dust that corner that you thought you got to. You didn't. You need to move the chair and get into the crevices of that corner because you haven't done all the work. And so, yeah, I think, and our outcry from that is always like, oh my God, again? Like, I thought I did this work. I thought I was this liberal, anti-racist person. I thought I was all of these things. No, now there's a new way to demonstrate that. Now we're going into deeper layers of that and understanding. But, the other thing I want to say about this, and I don't know, but it's just coming to me as you were just speaking, is that, it's like grief. If people have not experienced grief in their life, they're not going to know ever what it's like. So if someone loses someone, I mean, they can say, oh, I'm sorry, and, blah, 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 but they're never going to know what it is to be walking in your shoes, so to speak. And same thing with like a cancer diagnosis or whatever it happens to be. Nobody's ever really going to know what it's like. And it's never going to be over. I mean, my belief about grief is that it never ends, and that, you have love for a relationship and you don't have anywhere to put it. Well, okay, now this issue of us not recognizing, being whites, what it's like to have been a Black person for the past 400 years. No amount of education, I don't believe, and maybe I'm being really small-minded in saying this, is ever going to give me or afford me the opportunity to really know and empathize with what it's like until I reincarnate as a Black person. I can understand it intellectually, I can hear it, but I feel like there's a more depthful unrest with people about what we're not getting. And how are we going to convert every person on this planet to not become a Derek Chauvin? I don't know. I don't have an answer to. And what I do have an answer to is that the riots and the violence is not the way to do it, which I think everybody knows. But, I mean, on some level, it's, I don't know what the planets are. I don't know what's going to happen when Mars moves into Aries, I guess is what I'm saying. We've been able to change the uproar to a more peaceful sort of protest at this point, where people are communicating and police officers are on their knees, and there's a lot more talk than there is action. But I don't know, come the end of June.
Yeah.
This is not over.
Right. And I would agree with what you just said. I love your analogy about grief. And I have another story. So my cousin, he's actually my second cousin. When his mother passed away, his wife she's never lost anyone in her family, and not even a grandparent. So
right.
She, he was really close to his mom, and it hit him really hard. And he's that kind of guy that's always like, happy-go-lucky and, always wants to do something and whatnot. And he like really struggled for a long time. And at one point she said to his sister, my other cousin, like, how long is this going to go on for? Like, it's been a year. How long is he, is he going to be like this? And it's just like, okay, that is perfect example of what you were just saying. Someone who has never experienced grief.
That's right.
Just can't emotionally or mentally, logically, whatever, really understand it.
That's right.
And so I would agree with you that, even though I've been in an interracial relationship, I still don't really know what it is like.
That's right.
Black.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we'll never know. Right. I mean, not from that you know, I mean, at least we can say about grief, well, there's a possibility that you or me or someone else is going to lose someone. And then I can step into that box of understanding your grief a little bit better because now I'm experiencing it. But the Black thing, that's not happening, you know, until, like I said, unless my soul decides, okay, you need to reincarnate and get this piece, because that's not something you got in the last lifetime. You know, I don't know. And I'm not saying that facetiously. I just don't know what other answer there is to that, or what more people want or need right now to answer this, the cry of this protest.
Yeah. So I had another question. I don't know if
Yep.
I should have asked you this earlier in the week, because I don't know if if you have the answer on the tip of your tongue, or you'll have to like look it up or whatever. But aren't there some other times in history when these 4 planets have been in retrograde, like some other major events have occurred?
Yeah, so, you know, someone sent me something about Saturn having been in Aquarius during, actually, well, Neptune is in Pisces right now, which absolutely happened, I think. So Rodney King riots, let me just find it. I have it, but it's not completely accurate what was sent to me, because Saturn is not in Aquarius right now. Saturn is in Capricorn. So and that was when the Rodney King riots, was when Saturn was in Aquarius. So let me just, I do have it here. Somebody sent me a text, or I guess a post that they found, and thinking that, oh, we have the exact same lineup as we did before, and what could that possibly mean, and where are we going if this happens? So, okay, here it is. So, okay, the Rodney King riots, Saturn was in Aquarius. Pluto was in Capricorn during the American Revolution. Pluto is currently in Capricorn. Okay, that was during the American Revolution. And Neptune was in Pisces when Rome fell. Okay. And this person is saying we have all 3 of these right now, and they were asking for my opinion. Well, no, we have actually Saturn in Capricorn, not Saturn in Aquarius right now. So, I mean, there are some similarities. Can I predict where this is leading or what's going to happen? Absolutely not. I mean, I wouldn't even go there, but, you know, like I couldn't predict the pandemic. I couldn't predict any of this. But I think that, you know, retrospectively, a lot of times I can put stuff back together and say, okay, what is this about? What is it about on, you know, I mean, for these 2 particular individuals, who were the catalysts for all this rioting? Was there a code? Was their soul? This is what I believe about all people, that our souls come here with an agenda. So was George Floyd's agenda to, I mean, as his daughter, or the outcry is to save the world? I mean, you know, I wouldn't agree that rioting is going to save the world, but he supposedly was known as a gentle giant. He was a Libra, which basically means he wanted balance and peaceful protesting. So maybe by starting out in a violent way and evolving toward compassionate listening and, you know, peaceful protesting, and people really understanding and educating themselves more about racism. Like, I went to my youngest daughter's house this morning, and she has a 2-year-old, and obviously, as you know, a 2-month-old. And I saw a beautiful Black baby doll on the couch. And I said, oh, did Ruby get a new? And she said, yeah. She said, I bought it this week. She said, because they're saying that we need to actually do things, not, you know, so it's not in our thinking, it's more in how we manifest the actions. And so now Ruby has a Black doll in her collection of doll babies. And so maybe that's an actionable, you know, piece of evidence that, okay, we're we're trying to incorporate this new way of being into our homes, or
Right.
her home in particular. So,
And also I think for the adults, because I believe that we're not born racist. No
right,
one is born. I mean, you see children all the time that welcome any other child.
that's
It's not like, oh, I'm only gonna be friends with that person or hug that person or whatever. Like if you watch a group of
right.
children, they all interact with each other like they're all the same. I mean, they're all lights, basically. Like the way that I look at it is they just see souls, not,
That's
you know.
right.
And so it's interesting, I think that we can learn a lot from them.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
and
Yes.
and maybe, whether or not she would have asked for the black doll,
Right.
it's, like I think it's as much for the adults as it is for the
That's right.
children.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. And for her to see that that doll is welcomed into their home, and that doll represents all of us as well as the white doll does, and all of that. So
Right.
it's a piece of actionability in this, I mean, how can I be, act more action oriented in my belief system? So, okay, you dated a black man. I have as well. And that goes back lifetimes ago. But I don't know that that action necessarily stands up anymore in terms of what the racism movement is really all about today. I would have to educate myself a whole lot more about it, and understand it. And obviously, there's a lot of people out there that know it and get it and understand it. Certainly the millennial generation does a lot more than I do. So I guess listening to them and then deciding where I can be, I don't see myself protesting, but there maybe are other ways that I can speak to it and act it out in a way that, helps.
Yeah, so yesterday was interesting. I went to this like little group of women that my cycling coach got us all together, and it was basically about manifestation. So it was her
Hmm.
and a life coach that ran this little program of just talking about, how do you manifest and how do you raise your vibration and energy and all that kind of stuff. And she said something to me that was so simple, yet we probably don't think about it or we forget it. But she said, what if our job is simply just to wake up every day and be as joyful as we can? Just because that can help raise everybody else's vibration. You don't
Right.
know who's having a bad day or, what they're dealing with or anything like that. What if our
Hmm.
job is simply just to be joyful?
Right.
And that raises everyone. And so to me, that was just a really like profound almost
Right.
the simple thing, like the simplest thing. That's all we need to do.
Yes.
Like it's just if everybody focuses on like who they really are as a spiritual being and being joyful,
Right.
that raises the whole vibration.
So very much does. I mean, I think, as you said, children, little people see the souls because they're recently here from the other side, so they're really looking at or using their intuition and their light to intuit which souls they trust, which souls they feel comfortable with. They're giving us information all the time doing that. And we unfortunately have moved into that, you know, I don't know, that adage of, oh, the only way you can tell a book is by its cover. And that is so not true. I mean, we know it up in our heads, but we haven't downloaded it into our spirits in a lot of, I'm speaking for myself, and, a lot of situations, in a lot of cases, we differentiate, we compartmentalize, we judge, we do all of that. I mean, just bringing back the COVID thing for a minute, it's interesting too, because the disease, theoretically, depending on who you're listening to and who you believe, has affected, and I don't know what the percentages are because I haven't heard it, but it supposedly has affected the majority of people of color, more so than, and then we get into that whole thing of, oh, well, yeah, lower socioeconomic, or, you know, Latino or blacks, or they're the ones dying from it. And what is that about? I mean, is it, and I, not being a doctor, not being anyone who understands genetics, I mean, other than the fact that we then lump together, you know, well, there's a higher rate of diabetes, or there's a higher rate, you know, so what, again, I think that's also something that's possibly in the underbelly of this rioting too. You know, if there's a lot of people of color that have felt like this disease has, the disease itself, biologically, has discriminated against them more so than against whites. And that's, again, another, so that, you know, I read a piece by Obama, and one of his, I guess someone he was emailing about the George Floyd incident, and how, and I would agree, the literal positioning of this guy, you know, of George Floyd on the ground, on his stomach, with the police officer's foot on his neck, I mean, is such a metaphor for keeping someone down and, you know, obviously compressing his heart and his lungs. And again, so what if Floyd was the metaphor for, because I've said this before, the heart and the lungs are where the grief is stored. That's where grief is stored in the body. So if you have a lung issue or a heart issue, you know, I mean, fluid in the lungs, or congestive heart failure, or any of these things, I mean, that's where you haven't cried. That's where you haven't, you grieved. That's what, so is he the Jesus Christ, so to speak, of the Black people, you know, literally representing how they've been held down, you know, with the foot on the neck? Because the neck, again, is the connector between the head and the heart. I mean, if people have stiff necks, if they have issues in their hearts, it's because a lot of times energetically they're up in their heads a lot, and they don't drop down the emotions into the other parts of the body that need to be cleansed with tears and, you know, with processing emotions. And so things get stuck in the neck. And that's the, obviously, physiologically, it's the connector. And then energetically and emotionally, the head represents the thoughts, the heart represents the feelings, and we've got the neck in the middle of the two. So, you know, what was the foot on the neck supposed to mean from an energetic, a biologically energetic perspective? I mean, you know, is don't let your feelings out. Don't, you know, I mean, and here he is literally crying for his mother on the ground and saying, I can't breathe. I mean, that's going to be the cry. That's going to be the outcry. I can't breathe. Well, he's crying not only for himself in that place. He's crying for the world. I mean, you know, the world can't breathe in many ways. The world doesn't do this homework that you're all doing today. And, you know, I mean, it just doesn't. It doesn't. It runs from it.
And the same, related to the same thing with the virus.
Right. Exactly. That's right.
Very
Well, interesting too that virus and violence both start with VI.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I don't know if that's a connection or not, but yes, we've gone from the virus, which is violently affecting the lungs and the respiratory system, where we can't breathe, literally can't breathe. That's the big fear of everyone, is not being able to breathe. So if this were just a virus that gave us a fever or gave us some body aches or whatever, and that was it. But no, it's moving into the lungs. And why is everybody afraid of the lungs? Because the lungs are the breath. And what is the breath metaphorical for? Life or death. And, you know, his neck was absolutely, I mean, because Chauvin probably represents more of the head, obviously. You know, somebody who hasn't done his anger work, somebody who clearly, you know, was doing his anger work on his victims, because here we go again with taking it to the macrocosm. You've got 18 complaints for this guy, 18. over the 19 years that he'd been in service as a police officer. 18 complaints. Only 2 were disciplined. Yet everyone that knew him, including the woman who employed both he and George Floyd at the same nightclub in Minnesota as bouncers, said that Chauvin always overreacted and would take an entire, whatever, supply of mace and mace the entire club instead of just dealing with individual situations as they came up. So this is a guy who never dealt with anger, or dealt with it by making the people that he arrested or came in contact with victims of his own unhealed traumas.
Interesting. Have you thought about what his last name, what part of a word his last
Oh yeah,
name?
chauvinistic. Yeah. There's no, right, exactly.
No
I've thought about that.
coincidences.
I mean, Steve Jobs. I mean, like, how many people did he give jobs to? I mean,
Oh,
yeah,
too
there's,
funny.
I mean,
How about
absolutely.
Bill Gates putting a gate around us?
Yeah, that's right. And you talk about people with no credentials to be in the position he's in, and yet he's in that position with absolutely no, no resume to support it. Zero. Didn't even finish college,
Yep.
let alone medical school or any of the above. And yet we've allowed that we collectively have allowed that to happen. So again, we're back to the power issue. COVID stands for the 8, and Chauvin and Floyd are both 8s. There's no coincidence that they're both 8s and they're both 4s. There's just no coincidence. I don't believe in that. And one's 44, the other's 46. I mean, this is all, again, I go back to, what did the soul download to do? What did the soul download to do? Did the soul download to teach us some stuff? And what are we learning? Adam Lanza, how many years ago? We find out that this Connecticut murderer who machete, they grew up in the same street, 2 houses away from each other. That's another Venus retrograde issue. Okay.
That's so funny that I was just thinking about that. I was thinking, like a few weeks ago, oh, that would be a great topic to talk about.
Right.
It's like, and now, like, I think everyone's forgotten about that.
Of course, yeah. But that is so Venus retrograde. That is so, for this kid, I don't know. Somebody facetiously said online, oh, is there something in the water in Newtown or on that street? Is there something in the water? Maybe his brain was traumatically affected by what the kid 2 doors down from him did to all those first graders. We don't know. And then his father was arrested for sexual assault the month before. His own father was arrested for sexual assault 1 month before. You don't think that triggered the trauma in that kid's brain? I mean, come on. I just, it's very, I don't know, too many coincidences. And the name of the street that they both lived on was Ashnatanga, which is the name of a very, very old famous Buddhist. And yogi. Wow. So just, I don't, there's too many. And the guy that he killed, the second person that he killed, his classmate from Newtown High School, that classmate's father was a first responder at Sandy Hook.
Wow.
I mean, this is going back and bringing it all back from the past and saying that your brain and my brain and everybody else's brain stores a lot of SHIT.
Right.
And how that SHIT is going to come out either 400 years later or 3 years later or 10 years later is an unknown. But what I sense happens is that the universe sends someone here to be the messenger. Adam Lanza may well have been the messenger.
Right.
They were, too many coincidences. I mean, he was born on May 26th. He killed 26 children. He killed 6 women. He was the 6 of clubs and the 6 of spades. He killed 6 adult women. including his mother. It's just, and the six, he's double sixes, six is clubs, six is spades. The six is a sign of pregnancy and maternal feelings and domesticity. He was taken out of Sandy Hook Elementary School when he was in first grade because he was different and there were concerns about his behavioral health. So they took him out in first grade, and then he goes and kills 26 children however many years later. I mean, was that resentment or angst or or just a coincidence that he went and killed first graders only when he was taken out of first grade and his mother was a teacher in the school at the time? These are not coincidences.
Right.
How people, so I don't know.
Yeah. Well, so real quick before, because we're at 11. I was just thinking, like, back to what can we do? What are, I always kind of like, me as the Aquarian,
Right.
the humanitarian. What can we do? What can each of us do individually, or what is it about? What special gift do we have during this time that we can use to help ourselves and to help other people? So I remember one time you went through, like, we're not going to go through people's birthdays, but I was just thinking, like, from an astrological sign, one time I think on the call, we kind of went through all the signs, and we basically talked about what does each sign bring to the table, or what is their purpose, or that kind of thing. I'm just wondering if maybe we quickly go through that and just say, like, okay, so Aquarius, Aquarius is about humanitarianism, like what can I do, or what kinds of, how can I help basically society and even myself during this time, especially if things are going to get more volatile.
Right. I mean, I think that if you, just to generalize it for a minute, because it's, I think to look at what are the strengths of your sign, what are the deficits. Right now, it's a time to work on really, what am I, because if we look at this planet as just a huge underbelly of energy, what is it that I'm holding? What is it that I'm not working on? What homework assignment do I have an issue with anger management? Do I have an issue with judgment? Do I have an issue with, I don't know, egoic pride, narcissism? What would I like to change about myself if I had the opportunity to do it? Can I just jot that down right now on a piece of paper? What isn't working for me in my life that is part of who I am? What innate character flaws do I have that need evolution? And I mean, if you start to work on those, whether you're an Aquarius or a Pisces or a Capricorn or whatever the case may be, because they're not always related to the sign. I mean, they may be, but they're certainly related to your soul and the fact that your soul came here to want to do homework. Your mind, a lot of times, keeps you from doing the homework because we've had so many distractions. Now, if you work on your anger management issues, or what's underneath the anger, do I have hurt and grief issues that I've never worked on, that my mind has told me to dispose of or to walk away from or whatever? If I've not done the work, and I know truly that I've got a lot of, if I were on my deathbed today or tomorrow, what legacy do I want to leave? What do I want people to say about me after I'm not here anymore, after I've transitioned? That's the work. I mean, and because if you do your own work, then, obviously I don't have to worry about all the people on this call. If they do their work, I got to do my work. And I think that if everybody does their work, then we don't have to get out in the streets pointing the finger at everybody else who hasn't done their work. Because the reality is, all the finger pointing, what do they say? You're pointing the finger, there's 3 pointing back at you. So if I'm pointing the finger at Derek Chauvin, Do I have any anger management issues? Do I have any power and control issues? What, what is my stuff? Procrastination issues, insecurity issues. What would I like to change about myself if I only had 24 hours more to live? That's really, I think that's really the homework, because the world, the macrocosm right now is in an acute panic attack. And panic attacks emanate from a fear of death. I mean, any doctor will tell you that if you go to a hospital, everybody runs to the hospital emergency room thinking they're going to have a heart attack, when actually it's an anxiety attack. So an attack of the heart is essentially about, or an anxiety attack is essentially about, I'm afraid I'm going to die. So if you were told you're going to die in 24 hours, what would you like to go to heaven with, knowing that you've completed in terms of your own work? That's how I would answer that question.
That's perfect. That's perfect, I think, because
Okay.
again, it's like you said, it's not so much related to your sign or your card or anything
Right.
like that. This is universal.
Right.
And it's something that, again, it's an opportunity for each of us to look at, okay, what homework do I need to work on?
Right.
What are these things that I need to process and
Yep.
meditate on, and what's not working?
That's right.
So,
and what do I project onto others?
right.
What, in my relation, because a lot of times we have about 3 more weeks left of the Venus retrograde. So a lot of times it's about me not doing the work and then telling my partner what they haven't done. That's, everything's a mirror, including obviously even intimate relationships or relationships with your children or whatever the case may be. That's why everybody loves dogs so much. Not that they're not lovable, but it's because, there's no homework between you and the dog necessarily, or the dog's not telling you what you need to be working on, as long as you feed them and you pet them, so if the work gets more complicated than that, then everybody's running from the work. So, I don't know. I guess I go back to one, and I'll end with this. I go back to a seminar that I used to go to many, many, many years ago on addictive disorders. And there was a gentleman who used to always teach at the seminar. Now he's a huge voice in the field of opiate maintenance and management. And he would always say, at the end of life, there will only be one question that will be asked when you transition. And it will not be how many degrees, how many houses, how much money, what was your portfolio like, blah, 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 blah. The question that will be asked is, how well did you love? How well did you love yourself? How well did you love others? That's the question that will be asked. And we busy ourselves with all these other questions that really, in the end, don't matter.
Yeah, that's perfect. Actually, there's a guy that I follow. He's a naturopath, but he also talks a lot about just spiritual personal development. And his thing is, he believes we're here to do 3 things: to learn, to teach, and to love.
There you go.
Yep.
That's it. That's right. What did I come here to teach? Yeah, that's in my, actually my newsletter for this past month. What did I come here to teach? What did I come here to learn? What wounds are still unhealed within myself? Because if we busy ourselves with self, we'll find that we have plenty of homework and assignments to do. Our problem is that we busy ourselves with others in an attempt to escape self.
Right. So distraction.
Right. Exactly. Which is currently what's going on right now.
Yeah.
That's currently what's going on. So, a lot of distraction. So
awesome. Well,
right.
as always, this has been fantastic, and thank you, and thanks everybody for joining us. This is being recorded, and we'll have it emailed out to all of you. And then Marianne and I are going to work on a summer schedule. I think we're not going to be doing it every Saturday, but we're gonna get together and just figure out maybe we do something every other week, or we pick particular days, because I'm sure people will have things going on and that kind of thing. So we'll get that out to everybody too. Anyway, hope you all have a great day, and thanks again, Marianne.
Well, thank you. Thanks,
All right.
Dee.
Bye.
Bye.